Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. The mountains were supposed to mean freedom. No neighbors, no rules, no one telling Cody Graves what to do. But when a corrupt HOA showed up claiming his land, threatening lawsuits and violence, Cody knew one thing: they picked the wrong man to fight. Out here, justice wasn't handed down. It was earned. The morning air in the mountains of Idaho was crisp and filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. The first golden rays of sunlight stretched across the rolling hills, casting long shadows over the valley. Cody Graves stood on the wide porch of his newly built log cabin, sipping a steaming cup of black coffee, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction settle in his chest. For years he had dreamed of this moment. After spending 2 decades working as a marine engineer, traveling from one industrial shipyard to another, dealing with corporate nonsense and the ever-growing pressures of city life, he had finally escaped. No more traffic, no more crowds, no more concrete boxes stacked on top of each other like lifeless tombs. This land, 20 acres of untouched wilderness, was his and his alone. He had spent months searching for the perfect spot, ensuring it was as far from civilization as possible while still allowing him to access town when necessary. The most important detail had been that the property was not part of a homeowners association. Cody had seen firsthand how HOAs turn people's lives into bureaucratic nightmares, dictating the color of your mailbox, the height of your grass, and even the kind of fence you could install. That was not going to happen to him. He had been meticulous when purchasing the land, hiring a lawyer, combing through every legal document, confirming with the county records office that this land was free and clear of any HOA entanglements. There was no way anyone could try to control what he did with his property. The house itself was his own masterpiece. He had designed and built it nearly from scratch, using his skills as an engineer and years of hands-on experience. It was modest yet sturdy, a 2-bedroom cabin with thick log walls, a stone fireplace, and massive floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the valley below. A wraparound porch extended from the front, complete with a sturdy railing where he could lean against and just breathe. The silence was intoxicating, interrupted only by the distant cry of a hawk and the rustling of wind through the trees. Inside, the house smelled of fresh-cut wood and the lingering scent of varnish. The walls were lined with built-in shelves where he planned to store books and survival gear. A rifle rack hung above the fireplace, a necessity in these remote parts where mountain lions and bears weren't uncommon visitors. Cody was no stranger to living rough, and he had taken every precaution to ensure he was prepared for anything. His nearest neighbor was miles away, a retired Vietnam vet who lived in an old A-frame cabin. The town itself was about a 40-minute drive, small enough that everyone knew each other, but big enough to have the essentials: a general store, a bar, and a single-pump gas station. It was exactly the kind of place he had always wanted. For the first time in years, Cody felt free. No alarms, no schedules, no meetings. Just him, his land, and the endless sky stretching over the mountains. As he finished his coffee, he glanced toward the winding dirt road leading up to his property. He had spent days clearing that path himself, making sure it was sturdy enough for his truck, but rough enough that strangers wouldn't stumble onto his land by accident. He had earned this peace, and he intended to keep it. Little did he know, his war for freedom was just beginning. The morning had started like any other, quiet, peaceful, and untouched by the chaos of the outside world. Cody Graves had spent most of it chopping wood near the edge of his property, stacking logs neatly for the coming winter. The rhythmic crack of the axe against the wood was the only sound in miles. He liked it that way, but as he paused to wipe the sweat from his brow, he heard something that didn't belong: engines. At first, he thought it might be a passing vehicle on the main road down by the valley, but then the rumble grew louder. The unmistakable crunch of tires on gravel echoed through the trees. Someone was coming up his driveway. Cody's jaw tightened. Nobody ever drove up here, not unless they had a damn good reason. Dropping the axe, he turned toward the house, wiping his hands on his jeans. The long, winding dirt road leading to his cabin wasn't easy to navigate unless you knew where you were going. Whoever these people were, they had come deliberately. As the vehicles came into view, Cody's unease turned into a simmering irritation. 2 black SUVs pulled up side by side, their engines growling like predatory animals sizing up their prey. Their glossy exteriors stood out against the rugged landscape like city dwellers lost in the wilderness. The doors opened in near-perfect unison, and out stepped 4 people, dressed as if they were heading to a board meeting rather than a secluded homestead. Leading the group was a woman in her 50s, her short, platinum blonde hair cut in a severe bob. She wore a tailored suit, pristine and completely impractical for the terrain. Her expression was one of casual authority, the kind of confidence that came from years of pushing people around and getting away with it. Beside her stood a tall, rail-thin man in an expensive suit, a younger woman holding a thick binder, and another stocky man who looked more like a bodyguard than a legal representative. Cody stepped forward, keeping his stance relaxed but firm. He had no idea who these people were, but he already didn't like them. The woman smiled, a fake, well-rehearsed smile. "Good morning, Mr. Graves," she said in a tone so condescending it made his teeth itch. "I'm Mary Jo Larkin, president of the Clear Ridge Homeowners Association. These are my associates. We're here to discuss your property's recent inclusion into our community." Cody blinked, then let out a short, humorless laugh. "My what?" Mary Jo's smile didn't falter. "Your land is now part of our HOA jurisdiction. The board recently voted to expand the boundaries, and your property falls within our oversight." Cody's patience evaporated. "You can't just claim my land like a stray dog," he said, crossing his arms. "I bought this property specifically because it wasn't under an HOA. I checked thoroughly." "We understand that," the thin man with the binder interjected smoothly. "But our expansion was legally approved at the county level. You'll find all the relevant documents inside this packet." The young woman stepped forward, handing him a thick folder stuffed with paperwork. Cody took it, but didn't open it. Mary Jo continued, her voice dripping with corporate diplomacy. "Now, I know change can be difficult, but we at Clear Ridge HOA are here to help. With our guidance, we can ensure that your property meets our community standards. And, of course, we'll need to discuss your outstanding fees." Cody narrowed his eyes. "Fees?" "Yes." She reached into her blazer and pulled out a printed invoice, crisp and professional. "Your first HOA dues, plus fines for non-compliance. Right now, you owe $32,000. For a moment, silence settled over the clearing. A long, heavy silence. Then Cody grinned, a slow, amused, almost dangerous grin. "That's adorable," he said, flicking the invoice back at her. It fluttered to the ground between them. Mary Jo's smile twitched, but she kept up her facade. "Mr. Graves' refusal to comply will result in legal action. If necessary, we can place a lien on your property." Cody took a step closer, his presence suddenly looming. "I'm going to give you one chance," he said, voice low and cold. "Turn around, get back in your fancy cars, and don't ever come back." The stocky bodyguard-looking man shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. The younger woman looked like she wanted to be anywhere but here. Mary Jo, however, held her ground. "You don't seem to understand," she said, her voice clipped. "We're not asking." Cody's expression darkened. "No, you don't seem to understand," he shot back. "This is my land, not yours, not the county's, not some overreaching HOAs. If you think you can take it from me, you're welcome to try. But I promise you—" He let the words hang in the air, thick with unspoken warning. For the first time, Mary Jo hesitated. She wasn't used to being challenged. She exhaled sharply and turned on her heel. "This isn't over, Mr. Graves," she said over her shoulder as she strode back to the SUV. "You'll regret this." The rest of the group followed her lead, climbing back into their vehicles. Engines roared to life, tires spun against the dirt, and within seconds, the SUVs disappeared down the road. Cody stood there for a long moment, watching the dust settle. Then, with deliberate calmness, he picked up the invoice from the ground, tore it in half, and tossed it into the fire pit near his porch. He didn't know exactly what Mary Jo's next move would be, but he knew one thing for certain: this was war. Cody Graves had dealt with his fair share of bureaucratic nonsense in the past, but this was on another level. The moment those SUVs disappeared down the road, he knew this wasn't just some idle threat. People like Mary Jo Larkin didn't take no for an answer. They saw it as a challenge, and he had just thrown down the gauntlet. That night, he locked every door, checked his rifle, and sat on his porch with a bottle of whiskey, staring out into the darkness. The mountain air was cold, but his blood ran hot with frustration. How the hell did these people think they could just claim his land? How many others had they already squeezed dry before they reached him? He wouldn't go down that easy. The next morning, Cody made a trip to town. He needed answers. His first stop was Holloway and Brooks Legal Services, a small law firm on the edge of town. Luis Holloway, his longtime attorney, and one of the few people he actually trusted, greeted him with a firm handshake. Cody slapped the HOA documents onto his desk. "Tell me this is bullshit," he said. Luis flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing. After several minutes, he let out a long breath and leaned back in his chair. "This is bullshit," he confirmed. Cody exhaled sharply. "Thought so." But, Luis added, holding up a finger, "It's very well-crafted bullshit. They've worded it just enough to sound legitimate. If you were someone who didn't know better, you might actually believe you had to comply." Cody clenched his jaw. "So, how do we stop them?" Luis tapped his fingers on the desk. "First thing, we file a formal dispute with the county and demand to see the records of this supposed annexation vote. If they can't produce legal approval, this falls apart." Cody nodded. "And if they did grease the right palms?" Luis smirked. "Then we prove it, and bury them in lawsuits." Cody left the office feeling slightly better, but he knew this was just the beginning. When he got home, he double-checked his property line, making sure all his private property no trespassing signs were still in place. He even added a few more, just in case. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Cody started to feel like he was being watched. At first, the attacks were subtle. His mail stopped arriving. When he called the post office, they claimed his address was not in the system anymore. 2 of his truck tires were mysteriously slashed overnight. A county inspector showed up unannounced, claiming someone had reported an illegal structure on his land. But then, things got uglier. One evening, Cody found a dead raccoon nailed to his front door. Its blood had been smeared across the wood in a crude X. That same night, he heard gunshots in the distance. Not random hunting shots, but deliberate warning shots, fired just close enough to his property to send a message. Cody wasn't rattled easily, but this pissed him off. The next morning, he strapped his Remington 870 shotgun across his back and rode into town again, this time to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Grant Morris was a grizzled man in his 60s, someone who had spent a lifetime trying to keep small-town disputes from turning into feuds. But when Cody explained what was happening, he could tell something was off. "I can file a report," Morris said, rubbing his temples, "but I doubt it'll do much good." Cody narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" The sheriff sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Clear Ridge HOA? They've got friends in the county office. Judges, council members. They own half the damn board. If I were you," he hesitated, "I'd be careful how you handle this." Cody gritted his teeth. "So you're saying they can do whatever they want?" Morris held up a hand. "I didn't say that, but they think they can. And until you prove otherwise, they'll keep pushing." Cody left the station more determined than ever. If the law wouldn't protect him, then he'd protect himself. That night, Cody set up hidden trail cameras around his property, carefully positioning them in trees and along the driveway. If anyone set foot on his land, he'd know about it. He also rigged up a few surprises: tripwires attached to flare traps, motion-activated floodlights, and a reinforced gate with an alarm sensor. Then he waited. The next night, just after midnight, the cameras caught movement. 2 figures creeping through the trees near his fence line. Cody grabbed his shotgun, stepped onto the porch, and cocked it loud enough for the intruders to hear. The 2 figures froze, then took off running. Cody grinned in the darkness. They weren't expecting him to fight back, but they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. This war, it had only just begun. Cody Graves had never been a man to start fights, but when one came knocking on his door, he sure as hell knew how to finish it. After catching the 2 intruders sneaking around his property on the trail cameras, he didn't sleep much that night. Instead, he stayed up by the fire, loading shells into his Remington 870, sharpening his knife, and making a mental list of every damn thing he needed to do before this situation spiraled completely out of control. If the HOA thought they could intimidate him, they were about to learn a hard lesson. At sunrise, Cody was already outside, reinforcing his fence line and installing new motion sensors. He had just finished securing the last wooden post when he heard it. Engines again. 2 black SUVs, the same ones from before, crawled up his driveway like cockroaches. This time, they didn't just park. They rolled right up to his house, kicking up dust, as if they owned the damn place. Cody didn't even hesitate. He stepped onto his porch, shotgun in hand, waiting. The doors opened, and out stepped Mary Jo Larkin, looking just as smug as before. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had brought 5 men with her, not lawyers, not board members, but enforcers. They wore dark coats, their hands tucked into their pockets, the bulge of concealed weapons not even subtle. Cody's jaw tightened. Mary Jo smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Graves." Cody didn't return the sentiment. "You've got about 10 seconds to tell me what the hell you're doing on my property." One of the men, a thick-necked brute with a shaved head, took a step forward. Cody immediately raised his shotgun, resting it against his shoulder in a casual but unmistakable warning. "Try it," he muttered, finger resting on the trigger. The man hesitated. Mary Jo sighed dramatically, as if she were the one being inconvenienced. "Mr. Graves," she said, voice cool as ice, "I gave you the opportunity to resolve this like an adult. Instead, you've chosen resistance." Cody let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Lady, I don't know what twisted little world you think you live in, but in the real one, people don't get to vote themselves into ownership of someone else's land." Mary Jo's smile thinned. "That's where you're wrong. The law is on our side." Cody's eyes burned into hers. "Then why do you bring the muscle?" A tense silence hung in the air. The goons were shifting uncomfortably now, realizing that this wasn't some suburban homeowner they could scare into compliance. This was a man who had built his house with his own 2 hands, who had spent years on the ocean fixing ships in the middle of deadly storms, who had hunted and fought and survived worse things than a corporate parasite like Mary Jo. Cody let his gaze sweep over them. "You're trespassing," he said, voice low. "Get in your cars, turn around, drive away." Mary Jo shook her head. "I don't think you understand." Boom. Cody fired 1 round into the dirt, just inches from Mary Jo's polished heels. The sound roared through the trees, sending birds scattering into the sky. The men flinched, hands darting toward their jackets. Cody tilted his head, daring them. "Go ahead," he said, his voice a quiet threat. "See how that ends for you." For the first time, Mary Jo's confidence wavered. She licked her lips, adjusting her blazer with a forced composure. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back to the SUVs, her men following without looking back. The engines roared to life, and just like that, they were gone. Cody watched until the dust settled. Then he reloaded his shotgun, turned, and walked inside. They weren't done, but neither was he. And next time, he wouldn't be aiming at the dirt. Cody Graves wasn't a man who liked dealing with the legal system. He preferred handling his problems with his own 2 hands, not in some stuffy courtroom surrounded by smug attorneys and judges who probably never set foot outside a city. But this war wasn't just about him anymore. When Mary Jo and her goons had left his property, Cody had known it was only a temporary retreat. They weren't done. Not by a long shot. And sure enough, 2 days later, he received an official court summons in the mail. Clear Ridge HOA was suing him. The charges? Failure to comply with HOA regulations, unpaid dues, and illegal modifications to his property. They were demanding $50,000 in back payments and fines, claiming that his land was now under their jurisdiction. It was a blatant power move, designed to drain him of time and money until he caved. But Cody wasn't about to roll over. The next morning, Cody sat in the office of Luis Holloway, his lawyer, and one of the only people he actually trusted in this godforsaken mess. Luis looked pissed. "They're bold. I'll give them that," he muttered, flipping through the paperwork. "But also reckless. They're making this sound airtight, but it's got more holes than Swiss cheese." Cody leaned forward. "Can we win?" Luis smirked. "Oh, we're not just gonna win. We're gonna bury them." The strategy was simple. 1. Challenge the HOA's legal authority. Cody never signed a contract and no legally binding agreement ever placed his land under their control. 2. Expose the fraud. Luis had already dug into county records and found irregularities in how the HOA had expanded its boundaries. 3. Bring in the other victims. Luis had already contacted 15 other homeowners who had been targeted by Mary Jo's little scam. Some had lost thousands in bogus fees. Others had already sold their land under pressure and threats. Cody had no intention of letting this end with just a fine or settlement. He wanted Clear Ridge HOA destroyed. 2 weeks later, the battle lines were drawn. Cody walked into the county courthouse dressed in a button-up shirt and jeans, while Mary Jo sat primly in her chair, dressed in a sleek gray suit, her expensive lawyer beside her. The judge, an older man with sharp eyes, took his seat. "Let's get this over with," he said, sighing. "Mr. Graves, I see you're contesting the charges." Luis stood. "That's correct, Your Honor, and we have more than enough evidence to prove these claims are fraudulent." Mary Jo's lawyer chuckled. "Fraudulent? The contract is clear, Mr. Holloway. The Clear Ridge HOA expanded its jurisdiction through a legal vote, which—" Luis slammed a folder onto the table. "A vote that never happened." The room went silent. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." Luis opened the folder, revealing county records, legal filings, and signed witness statements. "Your Honor, the alleged vote that Clear Ridge HOA claims expanded its territory, it was never registered with the county. In fact, if you look at Exhibit C, you'll find the signatures on their approval documents don't match the actual records. Several homeowners listed as voters were either deceased at the time of signing or never even attended any meeting." Cody watched as Mary Jo's face paled, but Luis wasn't done. "We've also obtained bank records linking Clear Ridge HOA's board to multiple cash payments made to county officials weeks before the alleged vote took place." The judge's eyes darkened. "You're telling me this vote was fabricated?" Luis nodded. "And worse. This isn't the first time they've pulled this stunt." He gestured toward the group of homeowners sitting behind Cody. "These are 15 individuals who have been harassed, threatened, and in some cases, forced to sell their homes under the same fraudulent claims." Cody didn't have to look to know that Mary Jo was losing it. Her lawyer tried to cut in, but the judge held up a hand. "Enough," he said, rubbing his temples. "I've heard more than enough." He turned to Mary Jo, his voice icy. "This court does not take kindly to fraudulent land grabs. Not only is this lawsuit dismissed with prejudice, but I am ordering a full investigation into Clear Ridge HOA's activities." Mary Jo stood up abruptly. "Your Honor, Sit down." She sat. The judge exhaled and looked at Luis. "Mr. Holloway, do you intend to file counterclaims?" Luis grinned. "Absolutely." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of destruction, for Mary Jo at least. The county investigation confirmed everything: fraud, document forgery, and illegal land acquisition. Several board members resigned overnight, trying to distance themselves from the sinking ship. Mary Jo was arrested on charges of fraud and racketeering, along with 2 of her closest allies. As for the homeowners, every single fraudulent lien, fine, and fee was wiped clean. Some of them even received financial restitution from the court. And Clear Ridge HOA dissolved, completely and permanently. A month after the trial, Cody sat on his porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. His land was safe. His home was his own again. And Mary Jo. She was rotting in a jail cell with a 10-year sentence hanging over her head. Cody took a slow sip of his beer, feeling true peace for the first time in months. The war was over, and he had won. The war was over, and Cody Graves had won. For the first time in months, his land was truly his again. No threats, no court summons, no sleepless nights waiting for the next dirty trick. Clear Ridge HOA was dead, its leadership either in prison or hiding, and no one would ever try to claim his home again. Cody sat on his porch as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long golden shadows over the valley. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth after last night's rain. He let out a slow breath, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. A week after the trial, Luis called with the final update. Judge ruled on the last of the counterclaims. Not only is your land permanently exempt from any future HOA jurisdiction, but the county put new restrictions in place. No HOA in this area can ever expand without 100% owner approval. Cody smirked. Guess that means no more hostile takeovers. Luis chuckled. Damn right. Oh, and Mary Jo. Looks like she's getting 10 years minimum. Fraud, racketeering, conspiracy. You name it. Cody nodded, satisfied. Justice had been served. A few days later, Cody made the rare trip into town for supplies. At the local gas station, as he filled up his truck, he caught a glimpse of someone familiar, Mary Jo Larkin, standing near the convenience store, looking utterly defeated. Her once polished appearance was gone, her hair unkempt, her suit replaced by a plain sweatshirt and jeans. She looked like a woman who had lost everything. She turned and saw him. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then, with a hollow laugh, she shook her head. Guess you won. Cody took a slow sip of his coffee, then said, calm and firm, it was never about winning, Mary Jo. It was about what's right. She didn't argue. She just looked away, then walked off. Her shoulders slumped. Cody watched her go, then finished fueling his truck. Some people never learned. Back home, Cody sat on his porch, a rifle leaning against the railing beside him. The land stretched out before him, untouched and untamed, just the way it should be. No HOA, no fake laws, no one telling him what he could or couldn't do. Just him, the mountains, and the sky. And for the first time in a long time, he felt free.